anyone going to read? Okay, this is recording. Okay, I just want to make sure. Look, my head is cut off, so let me put this up a little bit. Okay.
Actually, in mine, I can see your full head.
Oh, you can?
Stars.
Hey!
All right.
Great stars.
Okay, one
second. Dr. Abdul Sharif.
Okay.
Walaikum assalam. How's it going?
It's good. Don't worry about it. This is gonna be fine. Don't worry.
Okay. I can't see every. Why I can't see the? I guess the layout on this is. I don't even see your face. Like I'm only seeing like your ceiling. Like you have like a white ceiling with. Well, why is it? Why do I see it like that? Let me see the gallery. Do that.
No, you look fine, Salima. So maybe
it's my. I think it's my computer. It's me. It's something I'm doing or not doing.
One second. Salima, let me show you.
There you go. Okay. I see it. I'm good now. I see it. It just.
Do you see at the very top where there's a plus sign?
Yeah. No.
Camera.
Perfect. So, no, I see it now. I'm good now.
Okay. Salima, can you hear me?
Yes. Is that dear sister Shahida?
This is Atia. Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam, dear sister Atia.
So my brother is your illustrious barber, Rajai.
Oh, he hooked it up.
Rajai was just 2 days ago.
Okay, y'all, we go live at 7.
We go live at 7-6.
It's not corona. We just have a
you're muted. You're on mute.
So put it on mute.
We're live.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sisters Unite 23rd Annual Interfaith Health and Human Conference. We are here today, and today I hope that you have got the power, because I got the power. Today we have our 2 presenters today. Let me tell you, when we talk about power in our community, we have some illustrious people amongst us, okay? So we want to start off with Dr. Abdul Sharif. He is the Associate Professor of Political Science at Florida A&M. You all know where that is, the Sunshine State. His work focuses specifically on voter behavior and electoral contests on the federal, state, and local levels. He's received his doctorate in political science from Atlanta Clark University here. Dr. Sharif currently serves as the co-director of the Center for Deliberative Democracy, Civic Engagement, and Census Information at Florida A&M. Let's give him a round of applause, everybody. Woo! HBC. Okay. Now we're going to also tell you about our second speaker, who is, as most people refer to her, the miracle worker. In her current role, she is the director of an international nonprofit organization. She's experienced with, of course, multi-millions of dollars, because, of course, when you're in the big arena, you have to be able to handle that money both locally and globally. And she also serves currently as the chief of staff for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But we also want to make sure that we understand that she is the board chair of the Georgia Muslim Voter Project. So Salima is in the house. Woo! All right, so everybody, I don't know if you're excited about this political climate going on right now, but I am. And I am so excited to be here with these 2 guests, because today we're going to be talking about the power. And as we're going through this conversation, we want to make sure that you all are asking questions in the chat through the public chat. And we also want to make sure that you're asking questions that can get so that you can get those answers today from the illustrious people that we have on our panel. And starting off with the first question of the day, we kind of want to frame the conversation about the historical perspective of the power of the vote for communities of color. And so, Abdul, can you kind of start us off with that perspective of the power for people of color?
All right. First, I want to thank you all for having me here. It's a great honor. Also, just one minor correction. I'm assistant professor, so the associate is after you get the tenure. So I'm working on getting the tenure, and I'll be there soon. But right now, assistant professor. But thank you. No, I appreciate the introduction.
You're speaking it into existence. Speaking it into existence.
There you go. There you go. That's what it is. But I just had to make that clarification, because if others see it and like, well, you're not there, you have to talk this way. But I'm I'm for that. I'm for that. I'm for that all the way. All right. So if we're gonna when we talk about the history of the vote, communities of color, we have to start with the Black vote. And we'll start with the passage of the 15th Amendment in 1870, right? In 1870, that's when they allowed, or I won't say allowed, this is when it was pushed, because what was happening at the time, there was a lot of resistance from quote unquote enslaved people, right? So there wasn't a stable economy at that time, and the North understood that. And I don't want to get too technical, but when I say the North, I don't know how far in history I have to go back. Hopefully you all understand and you all ask those questions so I don't have to take up too much time to give that long history. But basically in the North, they understood that the economy wasn't stable because of certain rebellions that were occurring throughout the world, right? So again, because of that pressure, there was a push to discontinue slavery because it wasn't a stable economy system. And because of that, a civil war broke out between the North and the South. And then we have those amendments that's obviously the North, from historical aspect, as we know the history, the North won, and we have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The 15th Amendment was the right for Black men to vote, right? At that time, women could not vote. 19th Amendment was passed, and women and men could vote. Once that passage vote, we saw an influx in Black elected officials, primarily in the South. It's the first time we see in the history of the United States a Black governor of a state, Black senator, U.S. senator, House of Representatives, and Black elected officials throughout the South. And in that time, it was somewhat prosperous for Black Americans who was recently enslaved or under that particular type of system. You saw the economic life of Black folks tend to the amount of gains of the economic life and the education life and just the family life itself. So we saw a lot of gains. In addition to that, we saw that the political party, the party of Lincoln, the Republican Party, gained a lot of political power because of the Black vote in the South. So had it not been for the Black vote in the South, the party of Lincoln or the Republican Party at that time would not have the power that they had in the South to kind of restructure, or this term Reconstruction, in the South to allow it to occur. Now that was enjoyed from like 18. Well, we can start seeing the beginnings of those changes from 1865 to 1870 and 70s, and then once we get to 1877, this is where we see there was basically a exchange, or the Great Compromise, as they would say. Toward that, this is when you start to begin to see the switch of the Black vote. This is like the switching of the Black vote from one party to another. So the dominant Republican Party to the Democratic Party, where the Republicans agreed with the South or Southern Democrats that they would remove federal troops from the South, in these particular areas where Black people had a lot of success and gains, political gains and economic gains, that they would remove federal troops from maintaining that order or that type of establishment that would occur by allowing the presidency at that time, and it was President Haynes, Rutherford Haynes at that time, so allowing him to maintain the White House. So it was a power move. So they said, okay, if you allow us to maintain power without any too much pushback, then we'll remove the troops from the South. And when they did that, this is when we see the birth of Jim Crow. With the birth of Jim Crow, we start to see a lot of discriminatory policies towards African Americans, and then they understood the power of the Black vote. So you start seeing many tactics to kind of stifle the Black vote. This is where we see the poll tax, poll test, literacy test, something called the grandfather clause, where you have to prove or show that your grandfather voted in those elections prior to 1865 to vote. The white primaries, were that you couldn't vote in primaries, only in general elections. So you couldn't even select the candidate to go vote for in the general election. So because of that, it was a stifle of the Black vote because they understood the power of it. So we start to see from like 1910, 1915 to pretty much 1965, 65, a migration of the Blacks in the South from the North to go to the North. And through that migration, of course, economic gain was when they migrated to the North, there was a lot of economic gain, but also a lot of political gain. And in the North, the Democratic Party wasn't as strong as it was in the South. So they was able to kind of gain control of the Democratic Party. And there's a good book by Dr. Kanisha Grant out of Howard University. She speaks to how it's this title of Migration, Black Migration in the Democratic Party. And it timelines and gives thorough examples how particular cities such as Chicago, Detroit, and New York were able to gain, Black folks were able to get a lot of political power through the Great Migration, right? So again, we start seeing that the continued switch. Of course, there was some policies in place People will highlight the Great Depression and those type of public policies that from the New Deal or what have you, the New Deal and those particular policies that help with the switch, and that can be highlighted. However, it was more so we see the type of influence or the impact that Black folks had on the voting in those particular parties in the North, right? And then we move to 1965. We see the passage of the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement, or what have you. And again, that was through, in addition to that party shift or that realignment during that time, you saw a lot of organization amongst Black folks as well. And through the power of organization and pressure that they put on the system and the elected officials, we see the passage of this the Civil Rights Bill and also the Voting Rights Act of 1965, thus breaking down all the barriers that was in place at the time, the ones that was really hindering, stifling the Black vote. And then we see another influx in 1965. So like 100 years later, we see an influx of the Black elected officials within different places. And this is the first time we see a Black woman actually running for the presidency on a major party ticket, Shirley Chisholm, right? And then also in the Congress as well. So again, and then as we move forward, if we look at elections up till now, especially if we're coming from 1970s of Jimmy Carter to what we saw in the Clinton 96, and then if we look at Florida, and that's where my specialty is in Florida politics, but we see that when Black folks vote in high percentage, particularly in the 90 percentile for a particular candidate, that candidate wins that electoral outcome, right? So in Florida, if we look at for the past 20 years, from 2000 to now, when we look at it, and this is some studies and research that I'm doing, where when we look at Black folks and they vote in the 90 percentile, particularly in Florida and other states as well, and as a nation as a whole, they actually that electoral contest, right? So again, that's a little small history of the Black vote and the power of the Black vote. Again, there's other things that occurred as well, but again, essentially, when Black people turn out to vote in large numbers, they determine the outcome of that particular electoral contest.
Okay, I don't know if you all were on that roller coaster ride with that knowledge right there. Okay, that wasn't political science that I grew up with, but that was political science, okay? So with that information, now we're going to actually talk about the vote. The actual vote. So Salima, we know all of the tricks and the trade. We know all this stuff is still happening today, but we also still hear some people amongst us, even though through all of this oppression and everything, knowing that the Black vote is important, we still hear people saying, I don't know who I'm going to vote for, or I'm not going to vote. Can you talk about the power of why we should vote?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to everyone who's on. Thank you so much for joining and supporting. Atlanta Masjid is my home, and I have always looked to the work of the Sisters United in Humanity as a beacon for me. I also want to thank my brother Abdul Sharif, because it's so refreshing to see our brothers be scholars in this area and to be able to give us some historical context, so that what's important is for us not to think, well, we just woke up in 2020 and here we are. No, in fact, this was intentional, systemic, and planned. And so the disenfranchisement that we see today, the very overt and intentional suppression of the vote that we see playing out in Georgia. Georgia is now a domestic and international example of systemic, long-term voter suppression. It's important that we understand the historical context. I say thank you in that. So as to answer your question, I'm here because I'm the board chair for the Georgia Muslim Voter Project. And our goal, our only goal, is to make sure that Muslims are heard and represented throughout the state of Georgia. I'm so grateful that my fellow board member, Majida Abdul Karim, is also online and chatting as well. She is an international educator and activist and is working hard to make sure that Muslim voices are heard. So the thing is, we know that we have a lot against us at a systemic level, but also at just a very basic and local level. We're all up against it. I try to remember several things. One, voting is a gateway. It's not the end point. It's probably the least that you can do to be heard, and to make sure that the decisions and how you live reflect what you believe. It is not the end point by any sense. And you cannot just vote in these national elections every 4 years. You have to vote when you're concerned about our brothers and our sons and our daughters and our aunties being stopped by law enforcement. You must vote in your local elections. Oftentimes, local county sheriffs are voted by a couple of hundred votes. That's the difference. You want your children to go to school where they are welcomed and where they belong. You have to vote for your local school board members. You have to vote for your tax commissioner. You have to vote for your local state senators. You have to vote for your national senators, and you have to vote for your presidential candidates. And you must run as a candidate and be heard and represented and work so that we can make this a better place. One candidate in the presidential election right now, Joe Biden, owes his place right now as the Democratic nominee for president to Black people, largely Black women activating in South Carolina. Had it not been, you all saw the numbers, you saw that he was on his way down. And let me be clear, I'm not being partisan here. What I'm doing is reminding people of the power that we have. So I want to encourage everyone. I've put some information in the chats. I want to encourage everyone to go out to vote, bring people with you, be patient, take your time, take a day off of work if you need to. One, because our ancestors fought and died and bled for us to have this opportunity. So in respect for all of our grandmothers and grandfathers that fought for us to have this right, we owe it to them to go and vote. Two, you do it because this is how you are heard and how you can have impact and in how your community evolves and grows.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Okay, so now we're going to continue on with centering our questions more around personal and communal responsibility. So either one of you actually can answer the next question. It says, what can I do to ensure that my vote is represented in this current social atmosphere?
Naima, my sound just went in and out. Was that question for me?
It's for either one. It's just basically in general, you know how people, I think that what happens is people have this stigma that their vote doesn't matter, right? Or that they can't do anything. But if you all can maybe talk about some points, what can people do right now where not only can their voice be heard, but what can they do in their local and state areas to make a difference in this social climate right now?
So I'm happy to start. Or Brother Abdul Sharif, did you want to go?
No, Sister Salima, you go first. You go first.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. So what I'd say now, because we are, I think 19 days from a national election, a huge election for us at the local, state, and federal level, is get out the vote. Make sure, number one, that you vote. Make sure that the people in your household who are eligible to vote, vote. If you have, particularly if you are in Georgia and you have a problem voting, and with your absentee ballot or when you show up to the polls, reach out to us. I've put our contact information in the chat, Georgia Muslim Voter Project, but I've also put the Secretary of State, which controls voting functions as well. They have hotlines. You can reach out to me personally as well, which you all have my contact information. So that's the first thing, is vote, just because of the time. But after this election, we have to hold our leaders to account. So we don't just vote and walk away. No, we stay engaged in the process. We write petitions, we volunteer, we model how we want to be treated. We are involved in our local school boards. We are involved in the public commissioner and how decisions are made about funding schools, all of those things at the local level. I really believe that Allah has called us each to our own path, right? We don't all have to do the same thing, but where you're supposed to give. And we have brilliant examples of that in our community. So ask Allah to tell you, what should I be doing? Where should I function? What am I good at? What are my talents and skills? What am I interested in? What am I passionate about? Maybe you're not passionate about this, but you're passionate about making sure that there's recreational opportunities for our youth after school. Or maybe you're passionate about making sure that we have hiking trails so that people can go and breathe fresh air and climb up mountains and hiking trails. So whatever you're passionate about, be heard on it. You know, there's a quote, somebody will find it, by Alice Walker that says something along the lines of like, you give up your power, you don't realize how much your vote means. And that's like the trick, right? Like Allah has already endowed us with certain inalienable rights, right? Like you don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to fight for anything. Allah has already given you everything that you need. So segueing to James Baldwin, just put on your crown and step forward, right? Like you don't have to wonder like, do I belong here? Should I be here? Nope, you're already here. That means you're right where you're supposed to be. So go on, talk to your neighbor, talk to your county commissioner, talk to your sheriff, get engaged. We need you. And the thing is, particularly the African-American Muslim community, because we have the benefit of Islam coupled with the rich tradition of African-American history. We know how to community organize. We know how to combat and shift these systemic problems that we're facing. We already have the blueprint in our community. We must just enact it.
Okay, excellent. Abdul?
Yes, and I agree. And the key thing is this idea, like especially with younger voters in general. Do my vote count? Like, how is my one vote going to make a difference, right? So one thing that I always try to suggest to people or tell people that maybe you should join an organization, right? Because the one thing about the way how this system works, we live in a democracy, a representative democracy or republic, where we vote elected officials into office to carry out the day-to-day activities of making law for us. It's not direct democracy where we decide on day-to-day law. However, there are some mechanisms in place where you can kind of do that, and I will speak to that. But again, organizing or joining an organization, create an agenda for yourself. Ponder on what it is you want to see change, right? And then find like-minded people, right? So again, this is go from the mosque, the church, the synagogues, or whatever have you. Join those organizations, and with the power of organization, and because we have been, it's majority rule or majoritarianism, where you have to get enough votes in order to win an election or to see a particular policy outcome, right? So again, it's power in numbers. So this is why you see organizations develop, and this is why the formulation of political parties develop as well. Because how can I consolidate the vote to ensure that my particular party wins the election to have the outcome? This is the power of organization. This is when you need to be involved and organized, right? And you can always find like-minded people. It could be a group of friends. It could be 10 of your friends together. You all have the same vision or idea. You can start gathering together there, and then start petitioning that way. Right. So, and one thing that I tell younger people or people who are just disinterested in voting, there are mechanisms in place where you can directly affect an outcome in a particular municipality, city, and or state. And one thing that I highlight is you have that of an initiative. Right. One example of the initiative is what we saw in Florida. In an initiative, basically, you can, and it's through the gathering of petitions, so getting verifiable signatures to where that and on the ballot, and it could become law based off getting enough support behind it. So the initiative, it will put it on the ballot, and then you can vote for it during the election cycle and bypass the state Congress, the state legislator, and have that be implemented into law. In Florida, the Amendment 4, which allowed for recently incarcerated individuals to get their voting rights restored, was petitioned by individuals. These are those people that at Publix and all those stores that you keep walking past, and they say, hey, can you sign my petition? That's those people that you need to sign those petitions for, right? So, and then it was put on the ballot, and it was placed into law. The citizens of Florida decided to pass that particular, to have it become law. It did become law. It's some controversy with what's going on now and how it's affecting everything, but that process does exist, that mechanism does exist for you all to bypass the state legislator and actually affect your community directly, right? So, and that can happen on a local level as well. And another mechanism that's in place as well is that of a recall. So a recall basically is when you can recall the term of an elected official within 90 days of their term. If you feel as though that individual is not the way that you think they should be operating, especially in corrupt, if you can show that that's the case. So you can recall, and it's like about 22 states that can do it on the state level, like from the governorship all the way to the state senators or whatever have you. But on most localities and most municipalities throughout the United States, you can do that on a local level. You can recall your mayor. If your mayor is acting the way that you don't feel as though that they should be acting, you can actually get enough votes, and its mechanisms in place. You have to get a certain amount of votes, and once you get that petition signed, they have to have a recall of that particular election, and you can vote them out, right? So when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know we can do that. I thought we just have to sit and suffer, right?" And with that elected official, now it has to go through the process of impeachment. However, if we notice that mechanism is in place, it did happen. The president was impeached. However, again, it's that majoritarianism where you have to get enough votes or get enough people that reflect your interest in Congress, at least on the federal level, to get that to pass. Because had it been more Democratic senators or senators that was in support of removing Donald Trump, he could have been removed. So there's mechanisms in place. And lastly, I highlight the incorporation of a city or municipality, where you can actually petition to unincorporate a city. If you feel as though the city is taxing you too much, you're paying too much in taxes, it's just corrupt, whatever the case may be, and the members are corrupt, you can actually petition, and once you get enough verifiable votes, they have to acknowledge that petition, and it's a vote to unincorporate the city, and the city would no longer exist, right? There are some things to that as well, but again, you can do that, or incorporate a city and create your own city, right? So that's the power of organization. The more organized you are, the more likely you are to get a certain type of outcome that you desire, right? So again, so we that's what I want to highlight. But I'll stop right there. I won't take too much time.
Can I say one thing on this?
Sure.
I love that he's laid out all of these local examples in Florida that how we can engage. And I want to remind that in Georgia, we have the same thing. So if not the same thing, but we have options if you feel like you're being disenfranchised. So if you get to the polls or if you try to register and you have problems, we will fight for you. In 2018, Georgia Muslim Voter Project was a plaintiff in a lawsuit about voter suppression. We won that case in federal court. The ACLU, the Georgia Muslim Voter Project, CARE Georgia, there are organizations standing by. So if you take the first step, we will fight for you, and we will fight with you to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to cast their vote and be heard.
Okay. And with that voting, I kind of want to talk about three things, and then we want to kind of go into some questions that we have inside of our chat. So one thing with people, say, for instance, we know that the president has gotten on live TV and said that, hey, if you send in your ballot and you want to vote again, go ahead and go to the polls. We know that that is illegal. You cannot vote absentee ballot as well as go to the polls. So we want to make sure that people understand that concept. But how can we, well, let me go all the way back. When Abdul was kind of talking about how, everything is changing and or passed over or how it's voted into, I kind of wanted you all to kind of explain the difference between the Senate and the representatives, because I think that where people get kind of lost is when they say, oh, the president was impeached, right? And the power is really when we say that the power is in the Senate, what does that mean? Or the power is with the House of Representatives, what does that mean? Because there's so many senators that are represented overall for each of the states. And then there's so many people that are amongst the House of Representatives. And how does one have power over other? That's the first question, and representatives. And then the second, how can we get more people on the local ballot to run? That's the second question. So the first is about the House and the Senate and how what their roles are in terms of basically leading up to the presidency. And then how can we get more people on the ballot?
It looks like Dr. Abdul Sharif may be rebooting. So you want me to start or shall we? Okay. So the U.S., so the Congress, so we're talking at the national level now, the federal government, Washington, D.C. We're not talking about the local level. So there are two bodies, legislative bodies or bodies that make law. One is the House, sometimes referred to as Congress. members of Congress, and then one is the Senate, right?
Okay.
Some refer to as senators. So the House is based on demographics and population, and I'm boiling this down into short bits and pieces, but the bottom line is one of the big issues we have right now is gerrymandering and redistricting, where one party has largely milked the system.
Assalamu alaikum.
Naima, you muted.
Abdul, I can still hear you. We were actually just talking about the difference between the Senate and the representatives. I'm sure that when Salima comes back on, we can finish that. But the first part of it is I wanted you all to kind of explain the House of Representatives and the Senate, and what does that represent inside of Congress. And then the second question was, how can we get more people on the ballot? Meaning just like people showing up and being a state legislator, or someone being a sheriff, or someone being on the school district. Those. How can we get more people on that?
Okay, so let's start with the first question. The House and the Senate. So we look at the federal level. Again, each state has a House and the Senate. Well, it's the state Senate and a House, state House of Representatives. But if we're looking at the federal level, basically the Senate, it's made up of 100 members, and then of the House of Representatives, 435 members. And the way how that was determined, at least, if we start with the 435 members of the House of Representatives, that is determined by the population of each state, right? So as large as your population is, you get a certain amount of representation, right? So that's represents the House. Each state gets two senators from their state, so that's equals to 100, and this is where the 100 comes from because there's 50 states, right? So again, that's the makeup. And in order for a bill to pass, it's introduced on the House floor, and the House. So it's a two-chamber Congress. So you have the House of Representatives and the state, the Senate. Sorry, and then the House introduces the bills. And the bills go through a process, and from that process, it gets passed through. And if there's enough votes, particularly in this case, if we look at right now, the House of Representatives is predominantly dominated by the Democratic Party. If there's enough votes, it passes through, and it goes to the Senate. Now, the Senate and the House have to have matching bills, right? So this is where that compromise come about, to where that they try to adjust the bill, and or if it's of the same party for both chambers, then the bill passes seemingly through, as we saw in the initial beginnings of the Obama presidency, where it just passed straight through and it gets signed off by the presidency. However, in this particular case, the Senate is dominated or have a majority of Republican Party, right? So they have to. This is that whole negotiation. Hopefully, that they negotiate. Sometimes, right now, we're in a deep partisan divide to where that. Just because there's language that benefit or that states to benefit the Democratic Party more, they would not pass it, even though it may benefit the entire population as a whole, right? So we have a deep divide in partisan politics right now, and we see things not getting passed. But essentially, the way how it's supposed to work, there's negotiation, then they address some things, and then they develop a bill in the Senate as well that match that of the House, and it passes through both chambers of Congress. And then it gets signed by the president, because the president usually signs a bill if both chambers agree on it, usually. But in this case, if he doesn't like it or she doesn't like it, it can be vetoed. But again, if the House, if the Congress, I should say, determine that this is what they really want to pass, they can override that veto and it can still become law. So and one thing I always try to tell people, the presidency doesn't hold the ultimate power. It's actually Congress. Right, people tend to forget that. The tip and scale and power lays within Congress itself, and the reason why the founders did that, or the crafters of the Constitution did that, is because they want the power of the vote from you all. So that's that direct relationship from the citizens to Congress, because that Congress is who makes laws, right? So remember, the president's vote by the Electoral College, and the judicial branch, if you look at the state Supreme Court or federal justice, they're appointed and then affirmed or confirmed by the Senate, right? So again. That's the makeup of that, and this is kind of how it functions for the most part. Not to give too much or explain too much with that. And then you said
people need the explanation. That's why I wanted you all to explain it, because I think that what happens is people often kind of get in this emotional aspect of voting, where, oh, it feels good, or I need to feel good about my vote, instead of actually understanding the power of the vote. And the power is in the knowledge in which you impart on how you vote. And so, Salima, I know that you were talking about some disenfranchisement amongst our areas and how it's representative. You wanted to go ahead and continue that?
I just wanted to reiterate, and I'm sorry if you that I dropped off, but I just wanted to reiterate that there are many Muslim and mainstream organizations that are working to ensure that our vote is cast and our vote is heard. So do not let what you hear about voter suppression, particularly in our state and in our region, deter you. Go and register. Well, and now you can't, the deadline has passed. You can register for future, which if you aren't registered, I highly recommend that you do. But go and vote now. And if you have problems, reach out, because there are more resources than ever to make sure that your voice is heard. And we really have no excuse. I actually work on public health in sub-Saharan Africa, where and I've seen other parts of the world in the North and the South where to cast your vote is still not guaranteed. It's not written into the Constitution. And there are lots of very intentional obstructions. You could end up in jail. You could end up tortured. You could end up murdered. That is by and large not the case here in America. Go and cast your vote. Stand on the shoulders of your ancestors, of your community, of the word of Allah, and cast your vote and be heard. Our self-determination, our right to create the life that we want is inextricably tied to us being a part of representative democracy. And the ground zero to that is voting.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. And so the second question that we had was talking about how can we get more people on the ballot? But I think I want to go to the questions right now, because I think that there are some questions also that people were speaking about that. And so we want to start off with Sister Lisa. She asks, the first question that she has is, what law do we need to change or enact so that the moral character is a requirement for all elected officials, and so that an impeached president can be not eligible to reapply for the job impeached?
Yeah, all I can say, and then Brother Abdul Sharif can say. Do you hear? Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, yeah. So I, the thing about it is the word moral means many things to many different people.
Right.
So I try not to get caught up into that. But what I am clear on is that if people turn out in record numbers and vote against the candidate that they think is immoral, that is the best and most basic and easy way. We don't have to create new laws. Just get out there and vote the person out.
Right. Right. Abdul, you have any thoughts?
Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So she was saying, how can we ensure like an impeached president doesn't have the opportunity to like continue to reside over the country or whatever have you?
Right. So reapply for the job.
Okay, got you. It's going to take an act of Congress to change that type of to make that a stipulation in there. But how it sits, in order for him not to be able to go back, he would have to have been convicted, right? And then also removed from the presidency. He was just impeached. So the impeachment is just basically, it's the process, it's a trial process. That's all it just defines too. So when you said someone's impeached, you went through the process of you went under investigation for whatever it is you was brought to trial for. So that's the definition of impeachment when we're looking at what occurred in top of the year. Now, being convicted and removed, that's another thing. So once you're convicted and removed, then that would deter them from going in and trying to run for office again, or still presiding over the United States as he's doing, or the past presidents who were impeached, Clinton and Andrew Johnson of the past, right? So again, that's going to be difficult because, again, it benefit both parties to ensure that it has to be all those steps taking place for them not to continue to reside over the country after being impeached, right? Because that could have hurt. If you look at 96, if you would support Bill Clinton at the time, if you were, you may haven't then that same process could have been done to him, and then thus someone else coming into office. And so it can happen for both parties. So it can. So again, I would say that it'll take an act of Congress to make that change. And she already, Sister Salima already talked to the morality concept of that. It'll be difficult, but that's a good question though.
Okay, and moving on to our next question: is there a way to start a petition to make the Senate wait for new administration to select Supreme Court judge? This is interesting because if you all watched the vice presidential debate, Senator Harris actually brought this same exact scenario up when she was speaking with the vice president. Pence. So I'm going to go ahead and let you all tackle that.
Go ahead, Brother Abdul Sharif.
Okay. So can a petition be started to block or stop the confirmation of this justice of Amy Barrett, right?
Basically, yeah. Right now it's
yeah.
but essentially, I think the question in general would be any Senate. It's just now it's important now because the Republicans are ruling the Senate. But I think if it was a Democratic Senate, it would be a little bit different. But I think that, we understand what the question is, but is there a way to make a petition start whether they could actually stop it right now to wait for the new administration?
Short answer, no, because they'll have to change it. So it will take the Senate will have to change the rules. The rules will have to change in the Senate, and it won't be through a form of petition. In this case, this is going back to voting. Get enough individuals that reflect your party. In this case, you want more Democrats in office in the Senate, because the Senate does have the power to confirm appointees and also the impeachment process to remove the president itself. So the petition, normally when we see a petition works, and what I was speaking to, those mechanisms that's in place, it's mostly housed on the state level. When it comes to the federal government per se, and this is because of who votes the president in office and how it works, especially the Electoral College and those things. But again, a petition normally works on the state level. The way how you really can make change on the federal level, for the most part, is going to be through electing individuals that reflects your interests. So this is voting them out. This is that whole push to, I don't know, you've seen the whole campaign saying vote them out, blue wave or red wave, or whichever wave you're pushing for to get them out, because it's crucial to determine, it's crucial who reflecting whose interests in Congress, because right now they do control it, but it will take a rules committee change or a change of rules in the Senate amongst senators to make that change, and vice versa, the House as well. But it's not an individual petition that we can do and get a lot of people support behind it to actually make that change in Congress or in the Senate per se, and then also in the House as well. So I would say no, but you can vote, and this is how you can make that, and that voting will make that change.
Great. And I hope that everybody keeps hearing the continual word of vote, right? That's the power. The power is in voting. So the next question that we have up on is actually a statement/question. Someone would like, Camila is saying that she'd like to see those that have completed their time. And this is, of course, in terms of having served time for whatever, to get their records expunged and not to have to pay for it. Then they're made to pay for the rest of their lives and are subject to recidivism. Where to get this address? So I guess what she's actually looking for is like people, of course, who have paid time. They are, they're, even though they say, oh, you paid your time, it's okay. But guess what? It's the same thing that they did with us once we were free. You have the ability to be free, but we're not going to give you any resources to be free, right? So even though you've paid your time, you're free, but guess what? You can't vote and you can't get a job and you can't really live your life. So where do we start with that? And I think that begins with laws. And again, putting the proper laws in place, putting the proper petitions in place. So I think that what Abdul spoke about earlier, getting these small petitions and walking the streets and getting people to sign them and then turning them over in order for them to come into law. But you all, go ahead. You all are the more experts. So give us your vantage point on how we can get this started as well.
You're on fire. I mean, this is the thing. So what I want to remind people is that this is not like, oh, this just popped up and happened. This is all systemic and by design. And it is another way that they keep us from being heard. When I say us, I mean, I'm talking about African Americans. African Americans are disproportionately represented in the prisons and as ex-felons and ex-convicts. And they know, the government and people who make these laws know that if those convicts who've served their time and paid their debt to society were given the chance to vote, then they would likely vote in a way that was inconsistent with the values of white supremacy. And thus, what you see is very deliberate attempts. So in Florida, like Dr. Abdul Sharif said with Amendment 4, where they said, look, we're not going to do this anymore, and largely in a bipartisan way said, let convicts vote.
Right.
Cons and people who have been to prison vote, let them, because that's a part of your humanity. That's a part of your civil duty. That's what gets you back into society and holistic. And I mean, the US has some of the worst numbers around criminal justice reform. But as soon as the vote passed, immediately they said, well, if you have fines, outstanding fines, you have to pay those fines before you can actually vote. And so you see them trying to hold back and throw up as many obstacles as possible because they understand the power of your voice. They understand that if all of a sudden hundreds of thousands of men and women who have been through the prison system across this country started to vote, they would be out of office. So we got to fight for them, but we got to fight for ourselves too and continue to vote. I always, when the people are like, what can we do to prevent the Senate from, confirming a new justice? Listen, if we had voted in record numbers in 2016, the way we did in 4 years, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now.
Exactly.
We're only here because and I include myself in that, even though I voted. Did I do everything I could have? No. There's always more you can do. If we had done more in 2016, we would not be here today. So what we have to look at is what's it going to be? Somebody posted something to a chat saying, well, Andrew Yang, he was the one that I supported and he's out now. So I'm not gonna vote, or I'm not gonna support. You have to be strategic with your vote. And I am nonpartisan. You have to be strategic with your vote. It is a precious commodity. It is sacred and fundamental. So you really have to be thoughtful and intentional and deliberate because it makes a difference. So when you make decisions about how you're going to vote and if you're going to vote and when you're going to vote, you should be thinking about it like this is a precious part of what I can do. Am I doing it in the highest and best way?
And it's not a popularity contest. This is what I like to tell people. It's not about who you like. It's more about policies and understanding the policies. I think that people get caught up on, oh, this person, I don't like this, I don't like that. But what are the policies that they're upholding that stick to your values? And of course, everybody's not going to be 100% the candidate that you want, whether it's through color, race, religion, and even policies. But majority of the policies that you want represented for your life as an individual is what I think we should all be voting for. Next two questions are, how can we get people from the president all the way down to our local level representatives to have them serve a certain amount of time and no lifetime appointments? And I think when she's speaking about lifetime appointments, she's really just talking about Superior Court judges. And then the next question that she had was, what can we do to abolish the Electoral College as well? Right.
All right. So you can hear me?
Yes, it's your time.
Okay. All right. So as far as the lifetime appointments of Supreme Court justices, federal justices, and that's what we see mostly, those lifetime appointments are happening. they crafted it that way because they wanted to ensure, and they get paid a certain way, a handsome sum of money as well, and benefits and all that stuff. But it was crafted that way so that way they won't be able to get influenced by outside parties or outside entities, right? So by having a lifetime job, it's this idea that no one can sway you either way because you have a secure job and you're getting paid a good portion of money and you have a lot of benefits. That was the concept behind it. However, we still see these individuals are being influenced by outside parties and outside politics, and they're not judging or deciding or presiding over cases in that whole just way, right? I don't want to go too deep into like some of the Supreme Court justices and their ideologies about originalism and textualists, but again, it's based off of partisan politics again, and that shouldn't be the case. And that actually was, at least is what was framed by the framers, wasn't the intention of the lifetime appointment. However, in order to remove individuals, you can remove a Supreme Court justice and federal justice as well, and that's through the power of impeachment. Right. So again, it depends if there's enough senators in office who determine that some of these Supreme Court justices or federal justices as well need to come from the office be removed, and they listen to their constituents, and if the constituents want these individuals removed, they can actually go through the process and have these people impeached and convicted and removed from their particular seats, thus opening up seats, and you all can and they will. So, the president will appoint, and then the Senate will confirm that justice that's more favorable to the interests of the people, right? So there's mechanisms in place to remove those individuals, although there's quote unquote all lifetime appointments, but there's no direct removal that citizens can do themselves through a vote like that. And to the next point, how can we abolish the Electoral College? Again, that will take an act of Congress and states voting as well. So again, that's going to take a majority of Congress to get the amount of votes to have that restructured that way. It won't be through the power of us voting on an initiative or on the ballot itself. However, this is us pressing the elected officials in order to make that change. So again, if you get enough elected officials that reflect your interests, and this is what you're interested in doing, they can push to have that done to abolish the Electoral College. And going back to the point that you all made, and I agree with Sister Salima and Sister Naima as well, again, it's about who more aligns with your interests, right? So again, it's not a popularity contest, it's not who you like. Who more aligned with your interests? Okay, yeah, you don't like Biden, he says things, or vice versa, whoever's running for office. Who more aligns with your interests? Who's better to represent your interests more? Now, it won't be all of your interests, obviously, but most of your interests, or a good deal of interest, or interest in general. And whoever does that for you, and you look at their policies, their platforms, and what they said they were going to do, and what they have done in the past, their records, or what have you, consider all that and say, okay, I'm gonna vote for this person because more of my interests are met would be met if I vote for this particular individual. And if that's the case, that's how you should vote, right? Along that line of your interests, right? And if that happens, then again, hopefully you'll get the outcome that you desire by voting along your interests.
Okay, excellent. So you all, we are winding this all the way down. We had one question, and the answer was also inside of the chat, but we wanted to make sure that we address this question as well. Majida asked the question, if you applied for your absentee ballot, can you still go to the polls to vote? And so the answer is you can, even if you received it, but you did not mail it. Okay, so remember, if you received your absentee ballot, but you did not mail it, you can still go to the polls to cast your vote. It is very, very, very important to make sure that you know whether or not your vote was counted. Even with this early voting, I believe you can go to my voter page to see if your ballot was cast already. And Salima and Abdul can kind of confirm that for me. But if you notice that you maybe even mails in your ballot and haven't seen it cast as of yet, but you did mail it in, trust the mailing system. Do not get nervous and go to the polls. They are looking for a reason to lock people up. Okay, I mean, that's just the real deal. They're looking for a reason, and they will be doing that just because that is part of the systemic process of what they want to happen right now. So everybody thinks that everything's not going to be happening, just like with all this money that they gave out. They will be auditing people to make sure that you spent that money in the right way. They are looking to lock people up because the less people that they have to manage inside of the overall population that can get everybody locked up and people are not able to express themselves, vote, and all this other stuff, it's easier for them to manage on a governmental level. So just making sure that everybody is clear on what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, all of that good stuff. Everybody is voting right now on the chat for a part 2. Vote part 2. So yes, we got the power part 2. We'll be looking to see if we're going to be having that coming up soon, but we so appreciate everyone that has joined us today. Remember, your vote is your voice. And again, we want to thank Dr. Abdul Sharif from Florida State University coming and joining us today, as well as Salima. Not only is she the Chief of Staff at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, also the board chair for Georgia Muslim Vote. And remember, again, before we leave, vote, vote, vote. And when you're standing in that line, say to yourself, I got the power. All right. All right. So if anyone has any last statements that they want to put in the chat, thank you all so much for joining us today. We are so elated. And again, be looking out for our final poll surveys to be coming out from our Sisters United Health and Human Conference. And I don't know, anybody else want to say something before we vote out? Abdul?
Like you said, go and vote. Petition. Again, put pressure on your elected officials. Right. Never feel comfortable that they never let them feel comfortable in their jobs.
Excellent.
Even if you supported them.
Yes.
Never let them feel comfortable. Constantly press them and press the issue, whatever it is you're interested in making change, and organize. Join organizations. It's more power in the vote when it's organized, right? So again, that'll be my final words with that.
Okay. And Salima, any final words with you?
Thank you, Dr. Abdul Sharif. He said it all. The only thing I'll add is a thank you to all the behind the scenes folks, all of you online, to Sisters United Humanity who put this together. We need more of this, where we are activating our community, turning out our community, and building a better life for ourselves and for our children. So I thank you, all of those behind the scenes making the technology work, and Naima for being the hostess with the mostest.
Yes. Good job.
Always a beautiful and bright and educated light. I appreciate you, Naima.
Thank you so much.
Good job. Yeah,
and remember, everybody, voting is a full-time job, so let's get to work. I'll see you all on the flip side. Peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.